Good morning. It's Alan at Paraclete and Verity's Village too. This past weekend, Patricia and I were in Colorado Springs for the first ever Verity's Village retreat for the administrative and support staff and partners of Verity's Village. As you know, Verity's Village is very near and dear to our heart. We got connected with them through the research that we did when we found out about the diagnosis for our granddaughter Jewel, which she has trisomy 18. But anyway, I was asked to do a devotion at the retreat, and then after the devotion, I was asked if I would record it and make it available for others who maybe weren't there, or maybe to post it in the Verity's Village groups as well. But anyway, it's just a devotion on who we are called to be. So, but anyway, we're in the Denver airport this morning. So we left very early from Colorado Springs this morning, flew out, and we had a pretty long layover in Denver, and then we're flying back to Savannah in probably a little over an hour. So it's kind of loud here, but not as loud as it's going to get in a few minutes when people start arriving for the flight. But anyway, while we're sitting here, we're trying to catch up with some stuff and get some work done and things like that. And I wanted to go ahead and do this devotion because I'm sitting in the airport, and I was just thinking about everybody. But anyway, in 1 Samuel 17, 45 through 47, it starts by saying, David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those who gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you all into our hands." I gave each person there at the retreat a stone that has the word Yada written on it, and the scripture reference from 1 Samuel 17:46, where David says, "This day the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." In this story, we think that David is the hero of the story, but actually God is the hero of the story. David was just a little shepherd boy, and back in David's day, the youngest children, boys usually, were sent out to take care of the sheep. It kind of kept them out of everybody's hair, gave them something to do, gave them a job, and it was pretty much grunt work. They went out there, and it was kind of boring watching sheep all day, unless something came up and caused a little excitement. So they were watching the sheep for the family, and those sheep, they had different purposes. Some of them were being raised for their wool, some of them were being raised for food, and some of them were being raised for sacrifice. And it was very important to protect the ones that were there for sacrifice, because they had to be perfect when they were taken to the temple to be sacrificed. Every summer at the YMCA, we start our day for summer camp with our kiddos at campfire. We don't actually build a fire, but we do take them to a place where it's an amphitheater outside. It's very beautiful. But I go out there with them, and I take my guitar and I sing some songs with them, and I do a devotion a couple of times a week. But it's an area where there's wooden benches, like in a semicircle, and then there's a big platform with a big cross, and whoever's leading the campfire time, normally that's me, will stand or sit in front of that area. But when they designed this area, they covered the ground in rocks. There's lots of little boys in summer camp, and if you have any knowledge about little boys love rocks. They love to throw rocks, and there are lots and lots of rocks there. So, they're just genetically designed to throw rocks. As much as you tell them don't throw the rocks, they throw the rocks. But the shepherd boys, while they were watching the sheep would be in the meadow, and they would be like in the hills and on the outskirts of where the sheep were. So they had hours during their day where they really had nothing to do. So each shepherd boy would take a knife, a sling, and then rocks were part of the terrain. So they had plenty of those. But they became masters at fighting off predators with those rocks. They would toss them at each other. They learned how to use the sling. And David had become a very skilled marksman when it came to his sling and the rocks. But all during this day, when they thought that they were just doing things just to pass their time, they didn't know that that they were actually perfecting their skill. And David did not realize it as well, because he was becoming a skilled warrior, basically. But even before David was a twinkle in his daddy's eye, God saw who he was going to be. He saw that he was going to be a king, that he was going to be a warrior, and he was going to be a man after God's own heart. And everybody else just saw a little shepherd boy, but he saw who David was going to be. But David, when he went before the giant, and he didn't talk about how big the giant was. He talked about how big God was. But this is not a devotion about the providence of God and how he prepared for the victory that would be won that day, or of how when the waters began receding after the flood, that rivers were created where there were no rivers before, and how he gently laid 5 smooth stones in a creek bed for a little red-headed shepherd boy to pick up decades or hundreds of years later. But this is not a devotion about how when others see ordinary, that God sees extraordinary. This is a devotion about Yada. In the Hebrew, Yada means to know. Not like knowing your kids' names or knowing that your wife is always going to be late for just about anything. The word Yada indicates intimacy, a total knowing, a deep understanding, to know by experience. Kind of like the friends you always know that they think like you, and you don't need to sit by them at a funeral because the same things that are funny to you are funny to them. But David said these words the day he faced Goliath. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and the world will know that there is a God in Israel. When David shouted those words above the mocking shouts of the Philistine, he used the word Yada. The essence of this word is seen first in Genesis 4:1, when it says that Adam knew his wife Eve. We always think, oh, well, that's a sexual thing or a physical intimacy thing, and it's not necessarily. Eve was the only woman on earth. She was the most beautiful woman on earth. She was the only woman on earth. But Adam and Eve knew each other, and he knew her in an intimate, experiential way, a deep way. And then we see the word again when David uses it, that the world will Yada, that there is a God in Israel. He meant that they were about to know and understand the realness and the powerfulness of the God of Israel. You see the word Yada again in the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. In Genesis 14 it says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn and camp before Pi-haroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal-zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are bewildered by the land. The wilderness had closed them in. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so that he will pursue them. And I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know, Yada, that I am the Lord." And they did so. Finally, in Psalm 46:10, it brings it more personally to us when it says, "Be still and know, Yada, that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." But this is not a devotion about the providence of God. or how he prepared long before you were a twinkle in your daddy's eye, that the stone that he would ask you to pick up. This is not a devotion of how, when others see a mom, a dad, a counselor, a teacher, an entrepreneur, a business person, a preacher, a husband, a wife, a real estate agent, or maybe just a red-headed little shepherd boy, that God sees a warrior who has already been called up to the battlefield. But actually, it is a devotion about that. When I was a little boy, I had a severe speech impediment and a stutter. I stuttered so badly that it was hard for people to understand what I was trying to say. My oldest sister could understand me, so I would speak to her. But I was ridiculed so bad about it that at the age of 5, I just decided that I wasn't going to talk anymore. So until I was in the 5th grade, I didn't. So until 5th grade, when they sat me by a little girl who was very talkative, and then I began to talk, and I found my voice, and ever since then I've been pretty much making up for that. But do you know the 2 most powerful words in the whole entire Bible? You know, it didn't look like that I would ever be doing devotions or standing in front of people leading worship or speaking or teaching Sunday school or teaching Bible studies or any of those things back then. But the 2 most powerful words in the Bible are the words, but God. God had a plan to take an awkwardly shy little boy who struggled to communicate and place him on a piano bench. And while his little feet dangled off the bench, he created him a passion for worship. He had already decided that he would give me a passion for so much more. Long before you were born, God had prepared that stone that he will ask you to pick up, so that the world will know that there is a God. He uses the attacks of our enemy to bring honor to himself. Nothing that comes against us takes him by surprise. All things, even the hard, seemingly impossible things, work together for our good and for his glory, so that the world will know, Yada, that there is a God. When we face an impassable sea, our grave containing your loved one, the tragedy of a life-limiting diagnosis brought us together. But when others see the pain, hurt, frustration, and grief, God sees the courageous warriors who have been called up to the battlefield to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. When the world sees a heart that aches for a child who was lost, God sees a friend who will sit in the hard places and weep with those who weep. But our reach is not only to the people of our community, it is also to the world. God has given us a voice for those who are unable to speak. There are many who would say that supporting life for a child with little or no chance of survival is foolish, a drain on society, and an unnecessary burden on the parents. But those of us who have had these children, who fight for these children, know that that's not so. In 1 Peter 2:11 and 12, it says, "Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires, which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans, that they that accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us." You know, you may be a musician, you may be a businessman or a woman, you may be a passionate worshiper, you may write books, you may care for the sick, you may preach the word, you may meet heartache with hope and devastation with determination. You may be caring for a child you will be caring for their entire life. No matter the circumstances, no matter the giant, no matter the pain, no matter the sea, you may lead a Bible study and think that what you do doesn't make a difference. Your purpose and your mission is to glorify God and to live a life that lets the world know that there is a God. Be a good advertisement. This is the calling that you have on your life. Throw your stone and let the world know that there is a God in Israel, that there is a God in your heart, that there is a God. The giants will fall and the sea will part, and the God you know will show the world himself. What we do for the ones who cannot speak for themselves is our stone. Sling it with all your strength so the world will know there is a God. Yada. Have a great day.